You might not believe me, but the most difficult thing about fursuiting is this video right here. No, seriously, filming this stuff is genuinely hard work. Once you really dive into the process, you realize how much goes into it. Of course, there are different ways to approach it. You can just shoot something quick and easy on your phone for TikTok without any real setup, or you can go for a full-blown production with a professional camera, a tripod, and studio lighting. And if you don't have anyone to help you, doing it solo turns into a total nightmare. I've spent countless hours in front of a lens, and while I did most of that without a fursuit, I've only started filming in one recently. But even in just these few weeks, my friends and I have learned firsthand just how incredibly difficult it is. Creating quality content is always a lot of work. You're constantly messing with gear, setting up lights and keeping track of a million little details. But when you add a fursuit into the mix, all those usual production headaches feel 10 times worse. I've run into a bunch of problems during these shots, and the big one is that when you're working solo, you basically have zero control over the shots in real time. The suit limits your visibility so much. Even if you can glimpse the frame, it's nearly impossible to check the details on a small screen, so your shots end up being crooked or off-center. That's exactly why I kept having to reshoot some of my TikToks. I'd constantly mess up my positioning and end up in the corner of the frame with my head cut off. Shooting in landscape for YouTube is a bit easier since you've got more room to work with, but even then, I often end up having to crop or adjust the framing during editing, which is honestly a bummer. You set up the stand perfectly in your head, but then you're forced to crop in to hide your own mistakes. It's not always a technical disaster, but deep down, it just feels like the footage isn't as clean as it should be. If you're serious about this and working solo, you really need to get a bigger monitor to keep an eye on how you look in the frame. Controlling those little details makes a huge difference in the final result. The second major issue with working solo is managing the tech. Trying to fiddle with camera settings, lighting, and composition while you fully suited up is nearly impossible. I don't mean you're doing the whole setup in the suit, but you almost definitely need to nudge the gear around after you suit it up because you can never get it perfect on the first try. Plus, those poses kill your fine motor skills. Trying to hit tiny buttons, flip switches, or adjust a tripod when you're basically blind is a nightmare. You end up having to suit just to make minor tweaks or just settle for not having full control. And honestly, constantly taking the suit on and off doesn't just waste time, it completely kills your vibe and creative flow. Imagine you're finally gotten into character. The mood is perfect, and you know you're nailing the take, but then you realize the shot needs a tiny adjustment. That break to fiddle with the touch completely breaks the spell. Do the suit, adjust the gear, sit back up, try to record, realize it's still not quite right, and have to do it all over again. By the end of this loop, you're completely drained before you've even really started on the content itself. On top of that, being inside a fursuit is physically demanding. Your coordination takes a hit, and the risk of accidentally knocking over your expensive gear or dropping the camera goes way up, so you have to be extra careful with every move. And that brings me to the third problem. The physical toll. It gets incredibly hot inside a suit, and you feel the effects within minutes. I remember finishing a video for my other channel and realizing I was literally gasping for air. The intensity of working in that heat is just brutal. To be honest, I don't want to post fursuit videos without the voiceover because the raw audio is, well, pretty rough. My breathing is all over the place, I keep getting winded, and my speech ends up sounding muffled and strained from the lack of the oxygen. Plus, because ventilation inside the suit is so limited, it gets extremely humid. By the time I finally finish shooting and peel the costume off, I'm totally exhausted and soaked in sweat. Well, at least it saves me a trip to the gym. Sure, it's a good excuse to take more showers, which I don't mind, but in the middle of a shoot, it's a massive annoyance that constantly kills my momentum. Getting back to the audio issue, you have to fight a hard riff. No matter how hard you try, getting clean audio from inside a fursuit is pretty much impossible. It's always going to sound either muffled or just way too distorted. If you clip a loud mic inside the mask, it's going to sound muffled. And it's those mix every breath you take, especially the heavy ones, or even just the air moving past the capsule creates peaks that you can't really fix in post. The only reliable solution for me is to just do a voiceover later. Thankfully, I've got good gear for recording clean audio, which is a huge relief, even though it adds a ton of tedious thing work in the edit. All of this eats up a lot of time, and those extra hours inevitably becomes a standard part of the production grind. Then there's an issue of dehydration and needing constant breaks. From a health perspective, it's not safe to ignore what your body is telling you when you're suited up for long stretches. And filming a 15 minutes YouTube video without a single break is pretty much impossible. For my Twitch streams, I deal with this by propping my jaw open with something like a headphone case, and I keep a powerful fan aimed right at me to keep the air moving, which lets me talk for about an hour and a half without so much trouble. But when I'm filming on location, I obviously can haul a big fan around. That said, I've found that if you get lucky and there's nice breeze, it's a total lifesaver. That natural airflow is way more effective than any fan I could ever set up. Finally, there is one of the trickier sides to this whole thing, which is more psychological. When you're in a fursuit, you lose the ability to use your face to convey emotion. You have to compensate for that lack of expression by making your body language much more exaggerated, just so the viewer can pick up on the vibe you're going for. But that creates a major internal conflict that can be pretty draining. The thing is, when you're being this active and expressive, you also have to maintain total self-control so you don't go overboard. You have to be super mindful of every little detail, cause when you're in the head of the moment, it's so easy to stop being careful. I've been there more than once, getting so caught up in the process that I completely lose track of my gear. For instance, I've had my lav mic fall off and stay on the floor while I kept recording, and I had no idea cause inside the suit, it's physically impossible to notice stuff like that. As a result, this constant fear of ruining, hitting or losing something makes you too cautious. In an attempt to play it safe, you unintentionally look up and just end up standing there like a statue. And as I found out while working on a video for my other channel, that approach just isn't as interesting as you want it to be. It creates this tricky tug of war where the desire to make quality content is constantly clashing with the sheer stress of it all. And finding that perfect balance, well, it's tough. To wrap this up, I can say with absolute confidence that making quality videos in a fursuit is one of the hardest things I ever had to do, and I'm sure a lot of other furs who love creating content know exactly what I'm talking about. Any serious shoot, unless it's just a short clip, takes an insane amount of time, energy, and endless retakes to get a result that you're actually happy with. And for a perfectionist like me, it just turns into a total grind. Basically, the only real solution to this problem is having an assistant or even a whole crew. I remember one shoot where I had 3 people working with me. Sure, one was acting as a second character so we could film a scene together, but the other played crucial roles. One person was there to make sure I looked good, handing me water or aiming the fan at me during breaks. The other, the camera operator, was right there, calling the shots and making sure the framing was solid. That kind of teamwork makes the whole process so much smoother and more comfortable. But at the end of the day, it means that even a video that looks simple on the surface can be a massive undertaking, which is a lot to ask and not something everyone can pull off. That's exactly why I want you guys to appreciate the work that goes into the content from the furry creators you follow. Every video you see is backed by a huge amount of effort. The process is just way more difficult than just standing in front of a camera and hitting record like most creators do. Oh, and by the way, I completely forgot to introduce myself at the beginning. My name is Chris, I'm a fuzzy dragon, and I'm really glad you stuck around until the end. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.